What's up lads? In this video today, I'm going to dive deep into the topic of how COD's matchmaking system really works. Most people think it's skill-based matchmaking, where players of a similar skill level are put together in a lobby to create a fair, competitive environment, but the truth is actually much different. I'm going to talk about the history of skill-based matchmaking, and I'll give arguments that are in favour of its implementation and arguments which advocate for its removal. This is a controversial topic, so I'll try my best to view it from both perspectives. If you watch this video entirely, I promise you'll leave knowing a lot more about skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty and why Activision desperately wants to keep it in the game. Most gamers who are aware of matchmaking ranking have an opinion on it. Typically, the higher skill players have a negative view on it, whilst lower skill players welcome it. But what you'll find out in this video is that there is a lot more going on behind the scenes at Activision, and the matchmaking system they use isn't just about putting players of a similar skill level together. It goes much deeper than that. Before we dive in, if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. It really helps out my channel a lot. I post videos about FPS games and the gaming industry, so if that's your thing, click subscribe. So what exactly is skill-based matchmaking? Well, it's a system used to put players of a similar skill level into lobbies with each other. It's also known as matchmaking ranking. In the older COD titles, lobbies were created and filled with players based on ping. Ping is king. For example, if you load up the original Black Ops 1, when you search for a match, the game will find a lobby that has the best connection for you. However, in games that use matchmaking ranking, otherwise known as skill-based matchmaking, your ping and connection is not the only factor being considered by the game. Each player has a unique skill rating, which the game has formulated based on your past performance. You can't see your skill rating. It's kept private by Activision. We also have no idea how Activision determines your skill rating. It's highly likely your skill rating can be determined by multiple factors, such as your KD, score per minute, win percentage, etc. The exact details of how COD's matchmaking ranking system works isn't exactly clear. This ambiguity leads to a lot of confusion and frustration about the system, hence one of the reasons why it's a controversial topic to begin with. Skill-based matchmaking was introduced into COD in Modern Warfare 2019, although some people claim that they first noticed it in Advanced Warfare. Personally, I never noticed it until Modern Warfare 2019. Skill-based matchmaking significantly changed the way players were put into lobbies. Anyone who played the previous CODs before 2019 could tell you that matchmaking was vastly different then. But apparently, a form of skill-based matchmaking has always existed in COD. That is, according to Activision and a Treyarch developer. Back in 2020, a Treyarch developer said that all COD games have had some form of skill-based matchmaking, meaning that even fan-favorite games like Black Ops 2, a game which had marketing material that encouraged players to punch down on Christmas noobs, had certain systems in place. Activision also recently claimed that all CODs, since COD 4, have had some sort of skill-based matchmaking. Now, I personally have my doubts about this. Maybe other factors beside ping and connection were considered, but in no way, shape or form did any player believe at that time that the game had skill-based matchmaking. Nobody thought it was in the game. It wasn't noticeable at all. I don't recall any conversation ever taking place within the COD community about skill-based matchmaking back then. Interestingly, I discovered an interview with David Vonderhaar in 2010, where he was asked specifically about skill-based matchmaking and why it wasn't in the original Black Ops. He stated that skill-based matchmaking was never in any COD. So what is going on like? I don't understand how two Treyarch developers would have contradicting answers. It's a simple question. Was skill-based matchmaking in the older CODs, or was it not? David Vonderhaar, the multiplayer design director, explicitly said that it wasn't in the game. So was the other Treyarch developer and Activision mistaken, or are they lying? And if they are lying, why? Anyway, since we're talking about the past, I may as well briefly talk about the history of skill-based matchmaking. In 2006, Microsoft researchers proposed a skill-based rating system using Bayesian inference, and it was deployed on the Xbox Live network. I know what you're thinking. What the fuck is Bayesian inference? Basically, it's a method they use in statistical analysis. To explain this further, I'll use a very simple analogy. Let's imagine you have a big jar of jelly beans with different colours in it, but you can't see what's inside the jar. You need to figure out how many of each colour jelly beans are in the jar. So what do? Well, first, you make a guess about what's in the jar. Maybe you think there are a lot of red jelly beans and only a few green ones. This guess is called your prior belief. Next, you take a handful of jelly beans out of the jar and look at the colours. This is like getting some new information. If you see that there are a lot of green jelly beans in your hand, you might change your guess. Now, you think there are more green jelly beans in the jar than you originally thought. This new guess, after getting new information, is called your posterior belief. Every time you take more jelly beans out and look at them, you keep updating your guess over time. The more jelly beans you see, the better your guess gets. This skill ranking system was called True Skill and was used in Halo 2 at its launch. So let's use this analogy with COD's skill-based matchmaking. Imagine you load up Modern Warfare 2019 for the first time. The game has zero information on you, so it starts with a prior belief. The game assumes you are an average player. What does an average player mean? We've no idea what formula Activision are using, so for the sake of this video, let's just assume an average player is a player with a 1 KD. As you start playing matches, the game is beginning to learn more about you. Technically, it can track everything. It can track your KD, your win-loss record, your score per minute, and even other stats like accuracy and damage. It can probably even track how many buttons you press per minute. The game updates its belief system about you and formulates a skill rating. This is the posterior belief. This formula is repeated and refined over time. The more games you play, the more information the game has. Your skill rating is always changing. Therefore, the lobbies the game will try put you in are also always changing. Activision and the developers keep the skill-based matchmaking formula private. We have absolutely no way of telling what the game is tracking in order to determine our skill rating. We also have no idea how important skill is as a factor when creating lobbies. The lack of knowledge combined with the increasing criticisms of skill-based matchmaking in COD, and I might add, the release of X-Defiant, a game notably without skill-based matchmaking, forced Activision to start explaining how matchmaking works in their games. On April 4th, 2024, Activision released a blog titled Call of Duty, an inside look at matchmaking. In this article, Activision state that they are launching a new series of white papers from their technology team that will help further explain how Call of Duty builds online matches. The first white paper, focused on ping, has already been released. However, the next white paper, focused on skill, the one everybody actually wants to read, which was scheduled for release last month in June, is still yet to be released. On this blog, the game provides an explanation of all the factors that are considered when determining what lobby to put a player in. Activision states that their matchmaking system uses connection, time to match, playlist diversity, recent maps and modes, skill performance, input device, platform, and voice chat to determine what lobby you're in. The blog also goes on and briefly talks about how COD measures skill for matchmaking. So let's break this one down further. Activision states that skill is not only a factor in matchmaking players against enemies, but also when finding teammates. In my personal experience, if I solo queue a pub game, I rarely get teammates who I would consider to be at my skill level. I'm not saying this out of arrogance or cockiness, it's just my experience. I know many other players feel the same way. I don't care about winning every game, but it feels like some matches are deliberately formed to have me on the losing team. It doesn't feel organic like it used to. The teams are decided based on creating a competitive even match, or at least that's what most people think. It's important to keep this in mind. When I say the game is deliberately forming teams to have one team more likely to lose, I'm not joking whatsoever. This blog claims that COD has always historically considered player performance, among other factors, as part of their matchmaking process. They say that even COD 4 had player performance as a matchmaking factor. But earlier, we read an interview with David Vonderhaar who said it was never in the older CODs. Obviously, both of them can't be correct. The next part really stood out to me. Activision states that their data on player outcomes clearly indicates that the inclusion of skill in the matchmaking process increases the variety of outcomes experienced by players of all levels. In other words, all players are more likely to experience wins and losses more proportionately. Keep that word in mind, proportionately. Now, if you're unsure what this means, Activision clearly states that their current skill-based matchmaking system is purposely causing players to receive more losses or more wins, regardless of how good the player is. So the worst player to ever play COD will purposely be put into lobbies where it's designed for him to win, and one of the best players to ever play COD is put in a lobby which is designed for him to lose. All of this is done in order to make all players experience more wins and losses more proportionately. So the current COD matchmaking system goes a lot deeper than just matching players of a similar skill in an effort to create a competitive, fair match. The matchmaking system is designed to proportionately dictate the outcomes of the match. It's not just about putting players of a similar skill level into an even game. It's actually about setting up the statistical probability of a desired outcome prior to the game even beginning. Essentially, the game just decides that now it's time for you to lose because you haven't lost in a while, so it chooses the teams based on achieving this outcome. They do this because it's all about making players stay on the game longer. It's about engagement. It's actually engagement-based matchmaking. Obviously, this doesn't always work, but this is what the matchmaking process is trying to achieve. It's trying to make wins and losses more proportionate in order to keep bad players playing the game. Activision states that when lower skilled players are constantly getting shit on, they are likely to back out and quit. I think we can all agree that this is probably true. I think we can also all agree that Activision has an incentive to keep players playing and enjoying their game. But then, they go on to state that when these players leave, wait times for matches increases, and players might be put into lobbies with a higher ping, and that this leads to a worse ecosystem for all players. This might technically be true, but I think it's a lousy justification for skill-based matchmaking. This didn't affect anyone in previous COD games, or at least nobody ever noticed it before. So that's pretty much all we currently know about the Call of Duty matchmaking system. It'll be interesting to read the white paper dedicated to skill when it releases, but I have my doubts about Activision making the real matchmaking process public. After all, this is private intellectual property. Why would they make it public? The matchmaking system used in COD isn't technically skill-based matchmaking. To be more specific, it's engagement-based matchmaking, because multiple different factors are prioritized, all in order to achieve the desired goal of keeping players playing and engaged. It's not about putting players of a similar skill level into the same lobby. It's about deciding when a player should win and when a player should lose. All of this is done in the pursuit of keeping players playing and engaged. It's like a dopamine trick a casino or gambling company would use. If you want to learn more about how data analytics is used to keep people gambling, then I highly suggest you read the book Hunters: How Paddy Power Bet Billions and Changed Gambling Forever. On this blog, Activision also decided to answer some questions about the matchmaking experience. Have you ever tested removing skill as a consideration from matchmaking? Activision says that they have previously run tests, but they say data shows that when players are getting blown out, they tend to quit matches or stop playing altogether. But to be honest, this is a strange explanation, because in the next question they say this: does Call of Duty consider engagement, time played, as a factor in matchmaking? Activision say, we do not consider how often or how much you play when determining matchmaking. So again, what's really going on here? Does Call of Duty consider player engagement as a factor in matchmaking? Activision responded by saying they don't, but they use this as a justification for why skill-based matchmaking is needed in the game. Does anyone else think this is contradictory? You claim that engagement is not being considered, but then you use engagement and quitting the game altogether as a reason for why it needs to be in the game. So what are the arguments in favour of skill-based matchmaking? There's actually quite a few of them. It's not just Activision that uses it. Many other game franchises use it in their games, such as Halo, Destiny, Overwatch, Fortnite. Many casual players support and like it also. I'll try my best to refrain from calling these players shitters, free kills, or creddies for the remainder of this video. Activision wants skill to be used as a factor for matchmaking because, statistically, it shows that lower skilled players and average players are more likely to play longer if they're put into games where they can win, or if they can do well. If bad players are constantly doing bad, they're gonna end up leaving the game and possibly stop playing altogether. Traditionally, this wouldn't even be a problem for Activision, considering that the people already paid for the game. However, with the introduction of the Battle Pass and microtransactions, losing a portion of your player base is bad for business. If players stay online longer and play your game, the greater the likelihood of them making in-game purchases are. At the end of the day, it's all about the money. Besides Activision, some casual players also support it. Many claim that arguments against skill-based matchmaking are selfish. Why should players who are new or aren't that good at the game have to play every game against players who are much better than them? They claim this isn't fair. Why would anyone want to play a game that doesn't match players up that are equal in skill level? If you don't have skill as a matchmaking factor, then players who are new or bad will typically lose more, while players who are good will typically win more. Activision wants to make the game enjoyable for everyone, so they use skill as a matchmaking factor in an attempt to protect newer and bad players. Using skill-based matchmaking also protects average and lower skilled players from running into cheaters, as they may be would if it was turned off. Think about it, a cheater will typically have better stats, so they're going to end up in lobbies with good players. In theory, using skill as a matchmaking factor works from a business perspective. Activision wants everyone who plays their game to have a good time. Having a good time equals more time spent on the game. More time spent on the game equals higher likelihood of spending money on microtransactions. New and bad players also get to play the game without losing the majority of games they play. In reality though, it just doesn't work. Using skill to the degree it's currently used in COD is ruining the entire ecosystem from an enjoyment perspective. COD was always a run and gun shooter game where you could just jump in and have fun. Good players would typically do well, while bad players would typically do bad. This is how life works. It's literally the laws of nature. Players who are good get rewarded, while players who are bad get punished. The previous CODs, at least prior to 2019, were fun to play from a matchmaking experience for the majority of players. COD had no problem becoming one of the most successful and popular games in the world without skill-based matchmaking. In previous titles, bad players weren't kept in safe places. The casual playlist was full of a variety of differently skilled players. Each game was unique and a different experience. If skill was such an important issue regarding matchmaking, one which was causing bad and below average players from playing the game, then why did COD remain as popular as it did during the titles where skill wasn't tuned up so high? When skill is tuned up so high, like it is now, it forces every player in the lobby to try their best, regardless of whether you're a bad player, average player, or a good player. In theory, you're in a lobby with players around your skill level. No one wants to do bad or lose, so this causes players to use the best weapons and use every advantage they can get. What's happening now is that players are being discouraged from trying out all the different weapons in the game. If they use a bad weapon, they're gonna get smoked. Activision is forcing a competitive environment in every casual match, instead of just keeping it casual. If players want to try really hard, then let them go play ranked. What the fuck is the point of a hidden skill rating if ranked is in the game? Seriously, what's the point? While we're on the topic of ranked, I also want to say, the fact that you have a hidden skill level which dictates what ranked lobby you get into is fucking stupid. Your publicly visible ranked MMR should be the only thing that is used. Dat and ping, obviously, when deciding what ranked lobby you're in. If you're a bronze player, you play against bronze players. If you're a higher level bronze, maybe you play against low level silvers. That should be the way it works for all the ranks. In World War II, the ranked system was really good, and it was probably the best ranked system we ever had in a COD. I don't understand why you have to introduce skill-based matchmaking and then apply the hidden skill level into ranked mode when you have a publicly visible MMR. It just doesn't make sense. The current matchmaking process is forcing players into having a very similar experience each game. Not just good players, but all players. All players, regardless of their skill level, are now incentivized to use the best weapons and try their best. If you're wondering why the game is becoming less popular or less people are playing longer, it's not because bad players are getting smoked. It's because the game overall is becoming less fun to play. The game is becoming mundane and predictable. I also want to mention X-Defiant for a moment. X-Defiant is probably the closest game in similarity to COD. The game doesn't use skill-based matchmaking, and even if the news does come out in the future that it does use skill as a matchmaking factor, it's obviously tuned way down compared to the newer COD games. X-Defiant is a fun game to play, even with all its problems. I can hop on X-Defiant and end up in a lobby where sometimes I do the best, and sometimes I do average. I never know what type of players I'm going to play against. If every casual game of X-Defiant I played had players of my skill level all trying their best, I probably wouldn't even bother playing the game. I'm sure the majority of people watching this video agree. X-Defiant is fun and enjoyable simply because it doesn't have skill-based matchmaking, or at least tuned up so high as it is in COD. Thank God there is competition for COD, especially a game that doesn't have skill-based matchmaking, because now Activision can't use the excuse that it's an industry-wide trend anymore. We have a literal competitor to COD that is going in a different direction. It'll be interesting to see how Activision responds. If X-Defiant was never released, and players never got the chance to experience an arena shooter game without skill-based matchmaking, do you think Activision would be coming out and trying to explain how their matchmaking system works? I don't. I think X-Defiant is forcing Activision to explain. The majority of players had no problem with the traditional matchmaking system. The newer COD games are becoming much less enjoyable to play for the majority of players, regardless of your skill level. This isn't solely because of the way skill is used to create lobbies, but it's probably one of the biggest reasons why. I understand wanting to create an enjoyable experience for everyone, but the reality is, not everyone is going to enjoy the game. Bad players are going to get shit on, and good players are going to do good. It's literally the way the world works. No player cares about getting into bad lobbies and destroying everyone over and over again. They care about not being able to play the game without tryharding and having casual fun. They care about getting into games where they know it's rigged for them to lose. Even average players who are in lobbies with other average players can't have casual fun anymore, because they are also playing against players who are equal in skill level. Don't get me started on attempting to make player stats more proportionate. Good players deserve better stats. Bad players deserve bad stats. When you rig the lobby in an attempt to keep everyone's KD and win-loss ratio similar, it doesn't even achieve what you're setting out to do. It just makes the game mundane, predictable, and boring. I don't care about hopping on Counter-Strike or Valorant and getting smoked. Those games are still enjoyable. If I want to play against players of my skill level in those games, I'll hop into ranked mode, because that's what the ranked playlist is for. I don't think Activision is ever going to remove skill as a factor for creating lobbies. I think it's very obvious it's a move that's proven monetarily valuable to them behind the scenes. But thankfully, as COD fans, we now have X-Defiant, which can start competing with COD, and we'll see what the community prefers more, a game that has skill-based matchmaking or a game that doesn't have it. I love COD, it's been a big part of my life for many years, but undeniably the multiplayer experience is becoming a lot less enjoyable than it used to be. Anyway, let me know what you think about skill-based matchmaking in the comments below. Do you think it should be removed entirely, or would you like to see it reduced in significance? Or are you in favour of keeping it in the game? Let me know what you think below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching, I'll see you later.